Hi, this is Mons Michael. Today I am explaining about implementing basic authentication in ASP.NET Web API. So these are the topics we are discussing today. Why we need authentication in Web API, how basic authentication works in Web API, how to implement basic authentication in ASP.NET Web API, how to enable basic authentication in Web API, testing the ASP.NET Web API basic authentication using Postman. So the first one, why we need authentication in Web API. Authentication is used to protect our applications and websites from unauthorized access, and it also restricts the user from accessing information from tools like Postman and Fiddler. To access the Web API method, we have to pass the user credentials in the request header. If you do not pass these credentials, the server returns 401 unauthorized status code, and it indicating that the server supports basic authentication. Next, how basic authentication work in Web API. If a request requires authentication and if the client didn't send the credentials in the header, then the server will give 401 unauthorized message. In basic authentication, the user passes their credentials, that is username and password, which is in the encoded format, and at the Web API end, credentials are verified. If the credentials are valid, then the session will initiate to accept the subsequent requests without validating the user again. In this picture, it is clear that if we have the credentials, then we can access. If we don't have the credentials, then it will give us a message of 401 unauthorized. So next one, how to implementing basic authentication in ASP.NET Web API. For this one, we are using Visual Studio. So I have to open my Visual Studio. This is the initial page of Visual Studio looks like. Create new project. We have to search ASP.NET Web Application. Select the second option, which contains C#. Click Next. Here we have to give the project name, and we have to select the location. So I am selecting the location as BAT Information Encoding Standard Assignment. Select folder, create. Here we have to select empty and tick Web API and check whether the authentication. It should be no authentication. So three things we have to check: empty, no authentication, and Web API. Create. So we are creating the project. Maybe it takes some time. So this is the Visual Studio looks like. First we have to go to models. Right click on models. We have to add the class file. Add class file. Select class. Here we have to give the name. I give it as user. So add. So under model, there is one class file called user. So I am taking the other file. So this is the model and this is my user. We have to paste the codes which we require here. Similarly, we are creating some other class files. This is called basic authentication attribute, and we have to paste the code here: employee BL, user BL, and user validate. So as the next step, we have to create a controller. We are using this controller because to enable the basic authentication in Web API. For enabling this one, we are using a controller. So how to create a controller? We'll show you. So go to controller, right click, add, select controller, select Web API, and select Web API to controller empty, add. We have to specify the name here and click add. I already created one controller here, so I just cancel this one. So this is my employee controller. I given the name as employee and I pasted the code here. So after doing this one, like we are creating different class files and we are creating a controller, we have to execute this code. So click here, and it will direct to this page. In this page, we have to go to requested URL. So this is a requested URL. We have to copy paste this one. Just copy and paste, Control C. Then to testing this one, I have to open the application called Postman. So up to here we are done, and for the final step we have to use an application called Postman. So this is the Postman application. We have to open. Maybe it takes some time. Yeah, it opened. So click plus, and here I am pasting the URL code and typing API bar employee. So always make sure that this localhost address should be same as here, localhost 44398, and it should be same here, localhost 44398. So click send. It's showing that I have no access. The status is 401 unauthorized. So for getting the access, I have to go to a base64 format encoding file, and I am writing mail user here, mail user 123456, and encoded that one, and I got the encoded version. Just copy and paste this one, Control C, and go to Postman again. In the header section, I have to add the authentication. So I have to select the authorization. Here I have to type BA basic space the encoded format and click again, send. Now I got the status is 200, and I can see all the files here. So it works. This is how the implementation of basic authentication works. So these are the main 5 questions. This is why we need authentication. This is how basic authentication works. Implementing basic authentication in Visual Studio, and we are creating the project, creating the different classes. For enabling basic authentication filter, we are creating a controller, and after adding the controller, we are running the program. Then we are directed to a page like this, and we are copy paste the requested URL and open the Postman. Just copy paste the requested URL and send. But here in this section, we don't have the access, and we are getting an error message of sorry, the status is 401 unauthorized. So under the header section, we are giving another name as authorization, and we paste the encoded format here. So authorization basic, the encoded text file, then click send. Now we got the access, and this is how the implementation of basic authentication in ASP.web API works. That's all. Thank you.